Good afternoon, Hatfield Christian School parents. It really is a privilege for me to be able to speak to you today and to chat to you about preparing to send your children back to school on Monday, particularly the grade ones. And as a fellow parent, my youngest is in grade R and my oldest is in grade 5 at Hatfield. So as a fellow parent, I'm sure that you are sitting with some anxieties and uncertainties about the way forward. And what I'm hoping to do in conjunction with Jenny, whose video you will have probably already heard, is give you some practical, very basic ideas of how to prepare your children emotionally and psychologically for their return to school. I think the difficult thing about COVID-19 is that it is intensely traumatic for all of us when a circumstance or an event comes out of left field, something that we could not have predicted, something that we definitely have not lived through before. And when a situation like that strikes, we have to recreate and reinvent ourselves. We have to find a new normal. We have to establish new patterns of thinking and feeling and behaving. We have to adapt really quickly because our world is not exactly what we knew it to be a week or two prior to our lockdown. And so I really feel for you, and I know that as parents, you are juggling many things at the moment. Being a parent, many of you are still in the workforce at stage 5 and 4 and 3 of lockdown, and so you are wearing many hats simultaneously. And I really trust that you will be able to take a few minutes for yourself, wherever you can find those few minutes, just to be grounded and to replenish some of what you are giving out. I also want to take a few seconds to thank the Hatfield staff for the incredible effort that they are going to prepare the school for the return of the children. And I have seen the legislation and the documents that have been circulated to the schools in preparation for children returning, and the amount of administration and logistics around making sure that our school environments are as safe as possible is massive. And so I know they've been working extremely hard to prepare our children's environments amidst some really tough stipulations. And so I'm very grateful that we're part of a school community that would pay that much tribute and importance to legislation. So I think we can all rest assured as parents that our school leadership and our teachers are doing everything and more in their power to ensure our children's safety. That being said, I know, as I said, it's still really difficult to be a parent and to be getting ready to have your child return to school. So I'm going to run through a few things that I think might be helpful. And some of it will be around understanding ourselves, understanding trauma, understanding our children, what would be helpful for our children. And then I've done a few worksheets that you can use with your children at home to prepare them for Monday, but also to navigate them through every day as those days come along. I'm not an expert with technology, please excuse me. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to run through this PowerPoint presentation with you. And then these slides will also be available to you through the school. So let me quickly do that. Right. So as we start this slideshow, I just want to remind us that for all of us, this is uncharted territory. It's a situation that we are not really sure how to navigate through. And so each one of us is doing our best to really take it step by step and make the environment safe for our families and for our children. And I think that informs the theme of what I want to speak about this afternoon, and that is ensuring as much as possible that our children feel safe and that they are calm. Because when there's trauma and when there's uncertainty, we become immensely dysregulated. Nothing feels like what it used to feel like. And the first thing that is compromised is our feeling of safety and our ability to stay calm, especially in situations where predictability has diminished. And so the theme of this would be, how can we keep our children feeling safe and feeling calm And of course, as Jenny will have spoken about in her video, how do we keep calm ourselves as parents? So firstly, we want to maintain as much consistency as possible. When there's a traumatic experience or something traumatic happens, we lose consistency because we have to establish a new normal. And so if we can make things as consistent, like our routines and the things our children are used to, even the way that we may do things like pizza night on a Friday, but just as many things as possible should stay consistent. Bedtimes, waking up in the morning, brushing teeth, getting ready to do online school. With so much inconsistency at the moment, the things that can remain consistent, that's what we want to focus on. We have to establish a new normal, and that's why I said we are looking at routine and how do we create a new normal. And one of the ways to do that is to try, as I said, to be as consistent as possible with the small things such as routine. And tired children are not very happy children. So I think even though technically our kids don't need to be getting up early at the moment, in these few days preceding them returning to school, it would be wonderful if their routines can also be as normal as possible. When we feel traumatized, when we feel unsafe, and we feel uncertain, that's frequently because we don't know what's coming next. There's a lack of predictability. And in order to feel safe, you want to be able to predict what the next thing is that is going to occur. And for that to happen with children, we want to be prepping them and getting them ready for what they can expect. And we have to walk our children through this very slowly. So it would be something such as, on Monday, when we get to school, this is exactly what you will be seeing or experiencing. This is what's going to happen. And helping them to be able to predict their day to the most finite of details, if possible. That would be a very helpful thing to do for our children, is to make them feel as if things are predictable. They know what's coming next. Then we want to help them to plan for the unforeseeable, because if you are feeling uncertain and anxious and there is another circumstance that occurs that is unforeseeable, you couldn't anticipate it, that makes one feel even more anxious and uncertain. And so obviously these things are unforeseeable, so we may not be able to always predict the unforeseeable. That's the nature of unforeseeable. But what we want to help our children to do is to plan for things that they may not expect. And you could run through some of those things in your mind. What if one of them falls while they're playing? What would they do then? Or what if one of their friends sneezes close to them? Or what if their friend offers them a bite of their food and they take a bite, forgetting that they're not able to share food during this time? So let's give them a contingency plan for the things that are unforeseeable that they may experience as they return to school. But we also want to plan ahead and make things as predictable and as consistent and as routine-based as possible for the foreseeable things. So you will have received a wonderful detailed newsletter from Hatfield explaining what the children can expect as they return to school. And I think it would be helpful for us to go through each one of those steps, as I said, and to plan for the foreseeable things so that they feel totally prepared and that there are as few unknowns for them as possible. They will probably have many questions. Some children, depending on their little personalities, will have many questions about what's going to happen. Some of the children may have fewer questions, but I think answer every question that you can, as we would, being parents, and even those questions that you're not sure of the answers to. I think a safe answer would be, I don't know, but we can definitely find out from Mrs. Barber or one of your teachers, so that your children know that even the things that we don't know are things that we can try and find more information about. Then we want to stay calm. I think we want to encourage our children to stay calm, but our children take their cues about staying calm from how calm we as parents are. And so for us to stay calm helps them to stay calm. And they will be very aware of things like our facial expressions, our tone of voice, our body language. Our children are little detectives, as you well know, and they pick up on the things that we don't even want them to pick up on. So I think for us as parents, as Jenny has said in her video, just to be aware of our own emotional spaces and how that may be portrayed to our children. Jenny spoke about the 3 brains, and what I want to add to that is that in children, their story brain is not as developed as our story brain, because obviously they don't have as much of a past as what we do, and their ability to project into the future is also not as well developed as our ability to do so. And when we are talking about the story brain with our children, it is very helpful for us to provide a story brain context. So telling them stories about when they were younger and they overcame something that was difficult, or telling hopeful stories about the future, and assisting them in going between their story brains and their executive brains by problem solving, asking them how they would find a solution to certain things. But our children, as I said, will definitely look to us, and they will look at our reactions, and then they will either feel safer, or they may at times, obviously not with that being our intention, feel more anxious. And so we want to add to the stories that they're telling themselves about COVID-19 and about returning to school in the most helpful way possible, because we want them to feel safe. We want them to feel safe, and we want them to feel calm. So as I said, recalling stories of their bravery or your own bravery. You can even get lovely stories on the internet, children's storybooks of brave little lions or whichever animal they choose to use in stories typically for this age group, and just build into their ability to ground themselves and in their ability to imagine themselves being brave and being courageous, because this informs the story that they tell themselves about the difficulties that they will face. Then we really want to build agency and autonomy during this period of time. In trauma, one of the things that we feel frequently is a helplessness and a powerlessness. And as adults, we know how overwhelming and how uncomfortable those feelings are. Feeling helpless, feeling as if there's nothing you can do, you have absolutely no control. And when children feel that, they don't have the same capacity as what we do to make sense of what they're feeling. And in that way, we want to build into their ability to feel as if they can control certain things, and as if they can make decisions, that they can do things that are helpful for themselves, that they are not powerless, and that they are not helpless. And in the later slides, I will look at some questions and that we can ask our kids to help them to build their own agency and autonomy. But we want to frequently be asking them, what kind of plan do you think we can make? Or what do you think would be the best way forward? So that we are assisting them in building their resilience, but also in building their confidence that they are able to handle tough situations when they find themselves in those tough situations. So we want to encourage them to problem solve. That is also a function of the executive brain, and we can build that part of their brain and that part of their thinking by encouraging them to think about ways of solving situations, coming up with novel ideas and plans, which children enjoy doing in any case. And so I would encourage you to show them how to do that, and so they can then follow that example. We want to celebrate victories. So if your child is incredibly anxious to return on Monday, then we want to take every opportunity possible and celebrate even the tiniest of things that our children manage to do as they reintegrate into school. That might be the fact that they get into the car and put their seatbelt on, or that they've packed their lunch, or that they've remembered their mask. We need to find these things in what our children are doing so that we can celebrate them, that we can show them how well they're doing in the midst of tough circumstances, that we can show them that they are able to be taking agency and autonomy for their choices and their behavior. So let's celebrate every possible victory that we can. And the bigger victories, obviously, too. When they have finished Monday's school day, that is cause for huge celebration. And we want to not only focus on keeping them safe, but we also want to focus on celebrating and bringing joy into their lives in the situations that feel abnormal to them. We want to use the question, what can we do differently next time, a lot during uncertainty, because then we're not saying to our children, this is wrong, or how could you have done that, or using words that actually increase their panic. For example, if one of your children takes a bite of another child's sandwich, that's obviously a hugely innocent act that a child would do, something that they would have been used to doing previously and now they can no longer do. And I think it would be helpful for us to give them a plan and to help them to problem solve by saying, what do we do differently next time? And in that way, we don't encourage or inflame panic in them, but we solidify the calmness of, we are going to make mistakes. Not everything is going to be perfect. We can only do the best that we can. And if we make a mistake, we learn from it and we do it differently the time after. A fun thing to do is to introduce new traditions and routines during this period of time, so that we shift our children's attention away from everything that is abnormal or everything that they've lost or everything that is no longer the same, and we introduce things that facilitate positive memories during COVID-19. I think if we have our kids thinking back in a few years' time to what was it like in 2020, where we all had to be in lockdown and COVID-19 was a huge threat. I want them to have that memory because it's a reality to them and they've seen many ways in which our lives have changed. But I think it would be fabulous if we could supplement that memory with things such as, hey, remember we started playing Uno as a family, or we had ice cream night on a Saturday. Whatever it is that you can introduce that is specific to this period of time that helps them to remember it more positively would be very helpful. Then we also want to understand our children's behavior. Trauma disrupts behavior and it disrupts what children expect on a day-to-day basis. It disrupts how they make sense of things, how they think about things, how they feel. It disrupts the types of feelings they have, but also what they do with their feelings. And we can expect to see a huge amount of anxiety at times, perhaps sadness, things like depression, uncertainty, insecurity. And these are big feelings. We know that these are big feelings as adults because we have them frequently too. But they are very big feelings for tiny little bodies to have to carry and to make sense of. So we need to expect that we would see shifts in behavior from our children that are not necessarily about bad behavior or disobedience, but more about dysregulation. That would mean that everything that they've known as normal is no longer normal, and so they are not able to make sense of their reality, and we would see that in how they behave and how they make sense of things. So often children act out their emotions because they cannot fully understand what they're feeling, they cannot name what they're feeling all the time, and more so, they cannot articulate those emotions. For us as adults, I can tell you if I'm angry or sad or uncertain, and I can explain to you what that feels like and why I feel what I feel. But with children, that is still being developed. And so you will see that when they cannot make sense of their emotions or articulate their emotions, they begin to behave them. And it's not always congruent. They might not cry when they're sad. They might have a temper tantrum when they're sad. So it's not always congruent with the feeling that they're feeling. The behavior doesn't always match the feeling. Any behavior or huge despair of emotion that you are seeing, I would say that we should be quite curious as to why that behavior is happening, that we should observe it first and try and make sense of it. Ask yourself, what is happening behind my child's behavior? What is the behavior a symptom of? What is the behavior communicating to me? Because it's really, in a time like this, especially when there's trauma and uncertainty, the behavior we're seeing is very rarely purely due to misbehavior, but most frequently it is due to a thought or a feeling or an experience or an uncertainty that our children are keeping inside and are not sure how to make sense of. So observe it and wonder why this is occurring and what the child might be feeling before we react. You can also expect changes in concentration. They may be hyperactive or not as active as they used to be. You can experience, or you can expect your children to experience emotions that they didn't frequently experience or express in the past. So you may have had a child who you never knew to be an overtly angry child, and suddenly you see displays of anger. Or a child who used to be extremely happy, and now you see a sadness and a heaviness on that child. Or a child that is excessively happy, who used to not be happy. They can be overexcitable, and that might be a change in behavior as well. And so you can expect to see differences in how your children experience and express emotion. You can expect them to be uncertain and to feel insecure. You can expect there to be disruptions in sleep. Some children might sleep more than usual. Some children might sleep less than usual. Some children might have night terrors. Some children might wake up frequently throughout the night as they process what they are feeling and the reestablishment of normality in their lives. You would see similar changes in appetite, eating more than usual or less than usual. You may see physical symptoms like they have a sore tummy or they have a headache. They may not want to go to school because it all feels so foreign to them. And you may even see regression. So regression would be behavior that would be typical of a child at a younger developmental stage than what your child is at. And so if they are 6 going on 7, you may not have seen a full-blown temper tantrum for a year or so, or maybe for a month, a few months, and then suddenly you see rather magnificent displays of temper. That is to be expected, very normal, as they try and readjust to what is happening in their lives. We will look at when to become more concerned at the end of this PowerPoint presentation. Right. So what we've said is often children act out their emotions because they cannot fully understand them. Let's observe what's happening and ask ourselves what's happening behind the behavior, and then ask your children questions instead of always giving instructions. So if you're trying to understand your child's behavior, let's ask things like, what are you feeling? Where in your body do you feel it? What does it feel like? What would help you to feel better right now? Those are questions that would equip us to investigate and to better understand what our children are feeling, to make sense of what they're feeling and what they may be thinking before we respond immediately to it as if it was simply a behavioral difficulty. We want to be calming and reassuring to them. I think one of the most helpful things that we can do for our children is, if your child doesn't mind tactile displays of affection, is to be hugely affectionate, to hug them deeply, to reassure them of our presence. As I said, when things are unknown and when there's a disruption to normality, our children become insecure, and sometimes they may even, their thoughts will run away from them, and they'll think, well, if life can change at the blink of an eye, then how do I know that mom will be here tomorrow, or that dad will still be here? How do I know that mom and dad won't be very sick and that they won't succumb to the illness? And so our children will play out scenarios out of fear and anxiety and uncertainty that are hugely overwhelming for them. And it is our pleasure and our privilege then to reassure them and to be present, to be affectionate, to be compassionate and warm, and to make them feel completely secure in our presence and how we love them, that we are there for the long run, so to speak. So we want there to be warmth in physical touch. Sometimes the best way to buy your child a few minutes in processing what they feel is to play music. So you could say something like, let's just dance around to music for 10 minutes. What we want to do is give the brain an opportunity to shift from a very emotional space to a more thinking space. And one of the best ways to do that is to activate the temporal lobe of the brain, and we do that by playing music. So if you can see that your child just needs a few minutes to collect him or herself, then play music that they love or dance around together to music. Take 5 minutes on their bed to listen to classical music if that's something that they love, or go for a walk. From Monday with level 3, you're able to exercise not only between 6 and 9 in the morning. So you could take them for a quick walk. Physical activity also shifts how the brain processes emotion and thought. And then we can distract them, or to buy them time in processing what they are feeling, instead of just being completely overwhelmed by what's happening in their little hearts and minds. So in my next video, I'm going to speak about a few strategies that we can do to assist our children in preparing them for going back to school on Monday.